So describe the scene here. We got our standard starting lineup here, or
Yes. This is the standard. Well, actually, it was Mascara. So if we want to be honest, for this first game, it was Mascara instead of Saba. But that was their starting lineup during the run in which we beat Seattle and we beat Nashville, and then we lost to Cincinnati.
Yeah.
So first of all, for those of you who listen to the podcast a lot, we have some issues with Pineda, but I'm going to say we did seem to fix one thing. And the thing that we seemed to fix was the airplanes.
Yeah.
Okay. In two ways, actually. There are two really interesting ways that we fixed it. So first of all, what was happening prior is when we would start to come out of the back a little bit and move them up the field a little bit, what would happen is Lennon would go here and Wiley would go here. That was the classic airplanes, right? And what was happening is, as we talked about earlier, right, that was supposed to be overloaded. We'll just put a magical defender out here. But the problem was they're just so tight. All Lennon was doing was crowding Araujo space. Right. So he's fixed it in two ways. So first of all, if Lennon goes forward, Miles is coming a little bit further out. Abram is coming in here, and Wiley's staying at home.
Yeah.
So we no longer have just two in the back. We have three always. So that already makes us a lot less vulnerable and might be the reason why we did get two shutouts. Although I still think that we're vulnerable to some weak soft goals because we haven't, as we'll talk about in a second, we haven't fixed the center midfield. Anyway, the other thing that happened that was so good is that Mascara is actually our first non-inverted winger. He's a right-footed. He was playing on the touchline, like way out here. He had Lennon underlapping here.
Yeah.
And when Lennon comes in here and as an underlap, now it's actually the 2v1 that he wanted the whole time, right?
Yeah.
Instead of, as I was saying before, it was Araujo was here and Lennon was here. There's no space, right? But Lennon underlapping means that Mascara was hugging the touchline, and that was really working. Same thing, even when Lennon was back, Silva, as a right-footed inverted winger, is coming in here a lot and is good in those spaces, right? Whereas Araujo was not good in those spaces, but he's good in that spaces. And then Wiley is free to go here. And again, we're getting our 2v1. So yay, we're getting a little bit overloaded. There's a little better spacing when we have our single airplane and we have three in the back, right? So this is what we've tended to look like. So that's already a big improvement. Okay. Remind me when we finish, or what you want to do it right now. We can talk about it right now. So I assumed after all this, we finally had now Lennon. Let's go back to it being Lennon because I want to talk about it more on Lennon's side, right? I finally thought, okay, obviously the reason I was like, why did he fix it and have Lennon go underneath? Because Lennon, as Pineda will always tell you, he's the biggest goal chance creator in all of MLS because he crosses the ball from out wide, right? And he's really good at servicing the ball. So now why have him go underneath if that's the case, right?
Because Mascara certainly can't deliver a ball.
And Mascara cannot deliver a ball, so you'd actually like it sort of to be the opposite. But so I assume the only possible explanation for this had to be that Araujo was inverted as a left footer, so he was coming inside, and Lennon was out here. And now that it's not uninverted, it's Mascara on the touchline. He asked Lennon to come inside, and that all made sense to me until
Saba
came in the game against Dallas. So Saba's left-footed, so he's Araujo. So we would assume he's going to come inside where he's comfortable, and Lennon now would go back to here. Do you want to know what happened?
Do tell.
What happened?
Saba stayed here. Lennon came underneath again, and suddenly we're cutting the space again.
Another Araujo situation.
Yeah. What is the possible explanation?
I can't help you.
We always were assuming that he loved Lennon, so Lennon has to go forward, and he has to be wide because that's where he's good. He can cross the ball, right? So we were assuming that was the reason for the whole thing, right? Yeah. And you were sacrificing Araujo, who loves to be out in space and run, for that. And so when Mascara came in, it made sense because he wasn't inverted and he switched. but he
Yeah.
kept it
Well,
switched.
I think it'll work if Saba stays wide like Mascara does, though, because I think Saba can beat people straight down the line and can cross it and can be and he can come in and actually score the goal as we saw in the last game. So
God help us if that's true, because so Saba to me looks really good in tight spaces. He's really good. He's left-footed, but he also can use his right foot. He's
yeah,
really good under pressure. He can hold the ball. And it absolutely has to be him in here and Lennon overlapping out here, because Lennon honestly is useless underlapping. He's
yeah,
not that great in tight spaces. You
agreed.
lose his whole crossing ability. And how many times in the last 2 games have you seen Lennon put in a
Yeah.
good ball?
But if we do that, then Saba has to be a little bit more of a drop back in case Lennon gets caught up the field. Is all I would say there. Because the problem with that is like when it was Mascara, Lennon is the full duty of the fullback, and Mascara is a natural right person to just go down the line and terrorize people with his speed. In this situation with Saba, you're counting on Lennon's speed and athleticism to tire people out, which is fine to your point. And now you're leveraging Saba's skill sets to terrorize people on the inside.
Yeah.
But if Lennon is this far up, like three back is great. Don't get me wrong, but somebody needs to be a little bit more accountable to kind of help make it four more often. How do you see that unfolding then?
Honestly, I'm going to disagree with you. I got no problem with us having three in the back, especially if we have a defensive midfielder, fairly
Okay.
doing a good job here. If we have this and they're good, right? Because your key is when you lose the ball, right? So when the ball turns over here, the key to all of soccer is taking away the first option, right? So we'll put number 2 as his teammate. So his number 2 is here. So as long as when they're trying to play out of the back here, Miles is actually close enough to
Right.
here, you're fine.
You're pressing out of the back in this case.
Yeah.
Okay.
You just can't be caught where you have so few players that you can't match up, because then what happens? We get all this pressure. It looks like this. Right now, Miles is no way going to get out there, and all the pressure in the world here doesn't do you any good because they have the wide open player.
Yeah.
Right.
Agreed.
This is what happened to my daughter's team on the weekend. Nobody was pressuring this, and they just kept killing us with the split ball. Anyway, okay. So I'm giving him credit and saying, look, he fixed the airplanes because we don't have them both. We no longer have airplanes. We have airplane, which is better, way better. And we don't need airplanes because on the weak side, if Lennon has the ball up here and they're going 2v1, we do not need Wiley here. We need him back.
Yeah, because Saba and Silva are obviously capable of attacking other players.
Yeah.
Just like Wiley and Lennon can. But now you're adding another dynamic if only one of them is flying.
Because this player, if Wiley is forward here, it doesn't overload anything. I mean, it does, but the chances of having this is not so great.
So Josetu and Moyamba seem to be the preferred center mids behind behind Almada. You were talking, I don't know if it was earlier in the podcast or before the podcast, about Josetu seems to perform a little bit better when he's assigned a player, like we saw with Mukhtar. He was kind of able to shut him down. That was his job, obviously, to shadow him the entire game. But when you give him the freedom to roam and read the game, he does a really poor job getting caught in the middle of nowhere. How would Sosa coming in change that? Can you explain that to the listeners?
Well, so the thing that was killing me here is so Pineda is calling this a double pivot, right? So in a double pivot, what happens is one guy is a little bit further, Muyamba's here, and Josetu sits in for him. Or at times, Josetu goes here and Muyamba sits in for him, right? That's a double pivot, right?
And we're not seeing that in terms of evidence.
No. So first of all, Josetu doesn't go forward. It's just Muyamba, right? So if anything, it's a single pivot.
All action. it's all action Muyamba, which I love.
Yeah, which is fine, right? Yeah. But here's the thing, Muyamba, like in the first, I pointed out last podcast, in the first 2 minutes of the Seattle game, Muyamba shows up at the back post here. Okay, right? So that is not something that screams defensive midfielder, right? And that's fine if he's all action or whatever. But the other thing that happens is, as soon as we lose the ball, Josetu comes and he goes to really protect the back four, right? So in the Seattle and Nashville games, we had a lot of Muyumba doing this, and we have Josetu retreating immediately here, and this is what happens.
Yeah.
Right. So in the Seattle game, they did this. They literally, there was one time we got a counter. We didn't get our backs up that far. These guys were over here. They turned the ball over badly. They played it here, something like this. And this guy took the ball and dribbled 40 yards almost to here as everybody was running forward and backing up. Right. And nobody even addressed him. He went 40 yards basically from here to here without anybody even coming close to addressing him or tackling or anything. And I was like, yeah. Right? Like, how can somebody run straight up the middle? But the bottom line is that Josetu is dropping right in front of the backs, and Muyumba is doing this all action stuff. He often makes these runs or whatever. And there is a huge gap. Right? I mean, it's so obvious. And to me, what was so crazy is after the Cincinnati game, De La Torre, right? As the game wore on, it got worse and worse, right? We were starting on the front foot. In the middle of the first half, as I pointed out, they were really running. We got it maybe under control after halftime for 10 minutes, and then it was all Cincinnati, and the whole midfield was gone. And so De La Torre, who was coaching for Pineda, after the game, he said, I thought we started dribbling too much, and I couldn't understand why the game became so transitional. Basically, it was up and down and up and down. This is why Coach De La Torre, the game became so transitional, because we have nobody in midfield. Nobody, right? Josetu is back, but he's so far back, he's not covering anybody. And Muyumba's making these runs forward, and there is a 30-yard gap. When's the last time you saw a Premier League team that had a 30 or 35-yard gap in the center of the pitch? It happens. When does it happen?
It happens late in games when the game kind of breaks away into desperation.
When you have to go for it.
You have to go for it. Whereas it was, I've always said, when you're watching MLS when it's the 15-minute and it's an accordion, that's like, how is this accordion? Although, some of the games I've been watching lately, the quality soccer, maybe it's the Miami Messi effect, seems like it's getting better. But
even if Josetu was actually not right in front of him, which he always is, even if he was out in here, right, this would happen a lot. And he just cannot handle this to make the decisions.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very hard to do, but there's a few people who can. Sosa makes great decisions on those plays. Yeah. But he, the number one thing, if you're a defensive midfielder and you get in a 2v1, as a coach, what do I tell people, right, is don't worry about the 2v1. Wherever they play the ball, you've got to get on his back and not let him make this one. Right? Because once he makes this one, we're in real trouble.
When's the last time we've seen Sosa?
I was just about to
ask that. Sosa started against Dallas.
Oh, he did? Okay.
Well, it was crazy.
Because I missed that game. I was in a place with no internet, so I only watched the highlights.
So after all of this, right, we lose a game, right? and the Pineda thing comes in. So Muyumba goes to the bench, right? And so here, we'll move it. Yeah. So Josetu went to the bench and was replaced by Sosa. And it wasn't even Muyumba. Muyumba went to the bench too. And it was Sidic. This was suddenly our center midfield. Why?
What? Don't you think that Pineda's gonna claim rotation?
Sure. I mean, I think he says, Dallas is a weaker team and we can go with our weaker midfield. I think that's what he would think, is this is our weaker midfield. But again, it strikes me as having very limited creativity. We always have to have a defensive midfielder who he thinks is Josetu is the best one, who is not. And then Sosa can come in for him, but Sosa can never play with another defensive midfielder. Oh, no. That can never happen, because you have to have one of these and one of these and one of these. And in our team, you don't. As we've talked about, when you now have Silva, Almada, Gigi, and Saba, you got plenty of attacking. Just have some people to recycle the ball.
Yeah.
You actually don't really even need Muyumba charging all over the place. It helps sometimes and it's good. But if you're going to have Muyumba charging all over the field, first of all, it has got to be Sosa behind him,
Yeah.
right? Because he's actually defensive midfield.
But even like, yeah, I mean, I love the all action Moyan, but you're saying like, yeah, it's Sosa, he could be a little more measured in conserving his energy and just taking those moments with the skill set that he's got to take advantage of what he can bring, which is a lot.
Yeah.
I agree.
So
So
wait, what does Pineda think that? Do we know this? What Josetu brings over Sosa, or what Sosa is missing? Or we have no idea, or it's just what we
He
come back
doesn't
to.
like Sosa.
yeah, he does not like
It's just
Sosa.
one-
And you know
Okay,
why?
yeah.
To be honest with you know why I think he doesn't like Sosa? It's amazing. I see this, watching a lot of youth soccer games. The coaches are constantly screaming at this person. There's a person on every team who the coaches scream at, and they shouldn't. So there's a person who actually reads the game fairly well, works pretty hard, ends up in good spots, right? While so other people are not doing that and are not marking whatever, and they're the ones who always look like they get beat because they're always over by the danger. So the coach starts screaming at them, and so for example, if this is Sosa here, he's always over with the guy, and there's 2v1. And what will happen is, let's say for a while it was Sadich, right? Where did Sadich go? Sadich went here. And so Sadich will be caught in no man's land, or he's ball watching and the guy runs right by him. Does he ever yell at Sadich? No, because he's watching the ball and he's seeing Sosa come over to get his guy and get beat diving in right here. This was actually Sadich's fault.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or Sosa, yeah, people will say, oh, he gets a yellow card or a red card or is too aggressive in that situation. I think that's the perception everybody watches in that moment.
Pineda likes to penalize people, which I think is really bad coaching. So that we noticed this the one time Parata made a mistake, right? He made a really bad mistake and he went to the bench, and we haven't seen him back in the starting lineup ever.
Yeah.
Abram finally got his shot,
Yeah.
which to me, okay, if you think Abram's the better guy, play Abram,
Yeah.
fine. But don't make it about when you make one mistake,
Right.
you're
Yeah.
gone.
It's like a terrible psychological confidence
Yes.
tactic as a coach. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so
All right.
that's our midfield dilemma. And then the other thing, as we've already talked about, is this madness of pinching in. And I'll just point it out one more time. We saw it here in the clip. For those of you who couldn't see the clip, but Lennon was out here. Guzan plays the ball all the way up to, it was Almada who gets beat here, right? There's a guy, in here, and there's a guy, out here. Lennon comes in, right, to here, and then he comes in again. And we had a guy for him, and he leaves this. What?
Yeah.
Why?
No, there's no earthly idea. And there was more defensive people back for Atlanta United.
So
than
when
that.
I said that I thought that we haven't fixed everything, there's two things that I think caused us to give really soft goals. Well, actually, there were three things. We fixed one of them. So one thing that we were doing is we only had two back. We now have at least three back, so we fixed that. And that's probably why we're maybe slightly better defensively. But the other two things that we were doing are getting killed is one in the midfield. We don't have the right combination. We're not solid in the midfield. We're getting run over. That's still happening. And the second thing we continue to do is pinch in unnecessarily. So even when we do have players back, they still have wide open for the cross. And that's why you give up soft goals.